helped him.
It did help. It did help.
He bent me over a table, had an x-ray machine, pinpointed where the needle needed to go, gave me a shot of steroids that were to relax.
This is a big undertaking, you know.
What?
This is a big undertaking.
I don't know if people.
Well, if it, I tell you that a big step for council, if this gets done, they're gonna have to decide if they should put some teeth into it.
She says, well,
and
they force
enforce
things
it.
to the doctor.
Because if they do.
Because I went to see him, I was in terrible
I
state.
mean, I don't know if you've
He said,
noticed
I think
the
if you'll just stop
apartments
carrying your wallet
up
in your
in
hip
the
pocket,
valley,
you'll be all right.
they're falling down.
And
Yeah.
that didn't help.
Just
I started going to physical therapy for a couple of months, and that didn't help. I begged him for some and he just didn't feel like it was necessary.
Let's say less than half.
Oh, yeah.
So Labor Day weekend, I
Hey,
went to
we're live now.
orthopedics.
We're live.
Oh, okay. Let's go ahead and call the meeting of the Town of Abingdon Planning Commission for the month of September to order. Welcome to the Town of Abingdon, Virginia Planning Commission regular meeting. We appreciate your interest and encourage public participation in our meeting. Your comments are important to our decision-making process. Please note that there will be opportunities during the meeting for you to address the commission. The first will come when there is a request for public comment. The second will come if there is a public hearing on the agenda when the chairman declares the public hearing open for comment. If anybody wishing to address the commission should come to the podium, give their address and what they're going to talk about, give your first and last name, complete physical address. Comment should be limited to 3 minutes. Roll call.
Ms. Quetch?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
Mr. Pennington? Mr. Sproles? Mr. Wilson? And Mr. Schuman?
Here. We have a quorum.
We do.
All right. The next order of business is approval of the minutes, the regular meeting of August 22nd, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The next order of business is public comment. I don't know that there's anybody that's signed up for public comment. All right. The next order of business is certificate of appropriateness, Doug's Super Car Wash, Turnhart Acquisition Corporation, 2506 South Front Street, Richlands, Virginia. Owner, Jeremy Fields, Appalachia Design Services Representative. Certificate of appropriateness located at 140 Cook Street, Abingdon, Virginia, 24210. Tax map ID, parentheses 021-8-9A, in parentheses. I'm going to call on Mr. Bell to make any comment he think would be appropriate.
Just thank you, Mr. Schuman. Just as a introductory matter, I think that all of you are aware that the town there's a petition that's been filed to appeal the decision of the town council, which was on appeal of the Planning Commission of the Certificate of Appropriateness amendment on this same parcel before. I think it's unusual and maybe unique that a certificate of appropriateness has been issued by the Planning Commission and thereafter amended. It certainly hasn't happened since I've been representing the town, and in anecdotal comments, I'm not sure if any of the people now sitting on Planning Commission have gone through this before, so it's sort of uncharted territories. But in reviewing the statute that's applicable, that sort of establishes the right to have an entrance corridor affiliated with the historic district, which is the reason that we're here, in addition to the restricted covenants that were filed in the development of the Meadows property that this is a part of. The statute says when there is an appeal of the governing body's decision that all decisions are stayed. So I think arguably, this commission can act on that certificate of appropriateness until that process has gone through the entire process and the court has decided one way or the other. At the moment, there's just a request for a writ of certiorari for a petition to be filed. So it's going to be a number of steps until that is concluded likely. But I think at the moment, then we may be legally bound not to make a decision. But take that into, it doesn't say that directly, but reading and trying to piece all those things together, that sort of puts you in a quandary. And I think generally, I'm going to ask the representative of this what their take on this is. Let's say, and of course what's on appeal is a slightly different issue, which is just the color, and then what is being proposed here is a slightly different, or multiple things that are being proposed here. But let's say one of the judges says, yes, town council, you're wrong, I reverse your decision. This certificate of appropriateness should be granted, and in the meantime, this body had acted on the amendment to the certificate of appropriateness. Do they pick which one it is? Does the applicant pick? Does planning commission pick? Does town council pick? Do I pick? Does the judge pick? So it puts everybody sort of in a quandary of what's going to get built, not to mention the code enforcement and building officials of how we proceed. So I think there may be a little bit of a cart before the horse this evening, but I would invite you to hear what the representative has to say and keep all those things in mind.
I guess the question would be from me is, I think it would be fine to hear what's said, but we actually have multiple different requests, and we have an approved certificate of appropriateness, and we have a legal action against the town. I certainly don't mind hearing what the representative has to say, but I think maybe it would be advisable for us as a body to determine if we think it's appropriate to move forward, so that we don't waste the representative's time.
Sure.
Would you think that would be an appropriate?
Well, this is probably belt and suspenders, but I think it would be good to give him the opportunity to present it, and then you can make a decision based on that. So there's not the argument that due process wasn't followed and that we didn't give them an opportunity to speak.
Okay.
If I may, the only question I had is really whether or not this COA that is on the agenda this evening is a valid application. And if there's no action taken on it, if we table it, what have you, I believe there's 60 days, which affords us an opportunity, if you so deem, if the commission deems, to table the matter this evening. Just don't want to kind of get into a quandary of where we're bumping up against a deadline on an application that technically, if no action's taken on it, then would be deemed approved under the ordinance. Am I right on that, or?
If no action is taken, I guess it's arguable whether tabling is an action in and of itself, or
True.
if it is truly stayed by law, forbidden to act.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, that is a consideration. If it is tabled, I think it should be taken up one way or the other, probably at the next meeting or prior to the 60 days, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
Now, the certificate of appropriateness that was originally approved, does it remain in force?
Yes.
So if nothing else is done, then that certificate of appropriateness would be the one that was actually approved. It was never appealed. There were requests for different actions which were denied, so you still have that certificate that's out there, right?
It sort of depends on what the second one is. Is that an amendment or a proposed amendment of the initial one, and therefore the entire process is stayed? I think that's some of the multiple quandaries of this particular issue of whether, why did they apply in the first place for what was approved and then seek to modify it in the first place. When it is modified, is that a brand new certificate of appropriateness that's completely separate from the first one? And then again, are we asking today for a third completely different one? So it's cumbersome and confusing, but I think one view could be, yes, what was approved initially, all brick, red accents, was approved, and that's what can be built as it stands right now.
Additional questions for Mr. Bell? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Then I guess the next step is the staff report.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start with just a little bit of a background. In February of this year, February 2022, the project received the original approval. That was February 28th. And that was the brick facade and the red trim. So I'll pull that up so we can all take a look at that approved COA. In May of 2022, so this is what you all approved here. It has red trim, it's got a brick facade, and then the glass, which, as we all know, isn't part of the calculation. So that's what was originally approved. In May 2022, the project submitted an amendment to the approved COA, and the request was to paint the brick facade a classic red, is how they defined it, and to allow a brick cement board panel versus real brick. Do we have that here, Gabe? Okay, if you want to. It's, and so this was determined by the Planning Commission to not be appropriate. So that's what the certificate of appropriateness is this appropriate based on the standards that we have? So at that time, the applicant said they were amenable to real brick, but they wanted to come back to the Planning Commission for an alternative red color, because there was a discussion about what is a muted color, etc. So they came back in June of 2022 with a new red. It was a brand with a number 2000-10 to paint the brick facade. And then the Planning Commission indicated that they were not in favor of this and voted to not amend the COA, and that was June 27th. The applicants appealed to the Town Council, and on August 8th, 2022, the Town Council upheld the Planning Commission's decision to not approve the amendments to the COA. So tonight, the request, and I would say, I know there's some nuances whether or not it's a request or a new application, and this was the cement panel board that you all said no to. So the new request, they provided updated renders, and there's basically three pieces to this request. So there's the paint. They're asking for Sherwin-Williams Real Red, SW 6868. There's also a request as part of this to change the metal panels on the very top of the structure from the approved red to a silver color, and then replacing from the top of the windows to the second floor, instead of having real brick along that portion, they're asking for that to be metal panels. And I think this will come up here in a second, but basically there's three action items that they would like to have action taken on. Since that time, since they applied, as it was indicated, we did receive notice, and so we are now in a situation where there is a legal lawsuit. So here's their proposal. This is what they're asking for tonight. It's a little bit difficult to see completely. Try to zoom in here, but essentially this area here is brick, would continue to be brick up to the top of the windows. They're requesting that all of that be painted red, and then this area here is actually a panel, like a metal panel. It's not brick, and then the top of it would be this silver gray. So that's what's on the table tonight. And just to be clear, which I think that we heard some of this, but just to be clear, you know, when the Meadows development went through that original process, this project was part of the entrance corridor. It was a public-private partnership between the town of Abingdon and the Meadows development. And so as part of that, the Meadows development restrictive covenants said certificate of appropriateness. Before physical development of each tract, the owner of said tract shall apply for and receive a certificate of appropriateness from the Town of Abingdon Planning Commission and/or the Town of Abingdon Town Council. So there's been a little bit of an argument as to whether or not, once the project was built, if they're still in the entrance corridor. Well, this is recorded against each of the properties, and the only COA that we have defined in our zoning ordinance is, and this is a definition, refers to a permit issued by a board created by the town pursuant to the Code of Virginia 15.2-2306 to administer the provisions of the town's historic architectural design control or entrance corridor overlay district regulations. So the only regulations that we even have for you to go through a COA process with are the entrance corridor regulations. So I placed the entrance corridor regulations in here. We're down to some very specific questions, but when they first applied and were approved, they actually received, they actually had a lot more to their application, and you all approved quite a few things. So I'll just put them on the record. The first thing you all approved was landscaping. The applicants provided a landscape plan. That was approved February 28th, 2022. Signage is part of the COA standards, and there has not been an approved signage plan. They indicated that they would do that in the future. Architecture and general building characteristics, that was part of the original architectural plan, and you all approved that February 28th, 2022. Design guidelines, basically everything was approved in February, and what they're specifically come back and request is related to D7, D8, and D9. And so it's really a very small piece of everything that got approved that they're asking about. D7 says site materials shall be limited to local stone, asphalt, concrete, and exposed aggregate concrete. 8 says facade colors preferably shall be of low reflectant white, earth tone, muted, subtle, or neutral colors. Building trim may feature brighter colors as an accent material. The use of high-intensity metallic, fluorescent, day glow, or neon colors are discouraged. And then finally, that if there are trademarks, that trademark buildings and related features, including signs, shall be modified to meet these design standards. So it's basically saying if you have a trademark, you still have to make it match what's in these design standards. So the design review guidelines allow the Planning Commission to consider the project for appropriateness with these standards, and that's what you all have been doing. Site plan was submitted, that's section E. Site plan provided was approved on February 28th, and then lighting, we also worked with the applicants to have a lighting plan that was also approved. So right now, the construction that's out there is based on this approved COA. That's how they came through, got approved, and how they were able to get a building permit was because they have an approved COA. The Meadows development restrictive covenants, indicate that their minimum requirements just say that 50% of the first floor, front, and side exterior building elevations, excluding the glass, visible from the public right-of-way shall be comprised of natural clay brick and/or natural quarried stone products. So theirs are quite a bit less restrictive than our entrance corridor standard. So, and then they also say secondary facade materials, which again is this mix of brick and panel and glass, may be used for 40%, and those are hard coat stucco, concrete materials, synthetic stucco, fiber cement siding, and/or materials that are approved by the planning department. And finally, 10% of the structure can be painted, smooth face block wood, architectural metal, and other materials differencing from those as primary and secondary materials. So you've got two things happening. You've got the Meadows development restrictive covenants, which are actually a little bit, there's just a couple of sentences in there. Then you have the COA standards, which you're also bound by. And so you could approve or disapprove the application, or table it, for more or additional information. But what you're specifically looking at for the amendment is paint the brick Sherwin-Williams Real Red SW6868, change metal panels at the top from originally approved red color to silver, and replace brick above the top of window elevation on second floor to red metal panel. And for the record, you all as the planning commission are looking at this for certificate of appropriateness. The use as far as zoning and allowing a car wash in this area is not something that you all are approving or denying, just the appearance. So with that, I could try to answer any questions. The applicant is obviously here to answer more questions as well.
Questions? Are the percentages that you quoted, do they apply? Because it appears to me with the silver and the metal above the second window that does not meet the guidelines.
So I will let you talk to the applicants regarding that. They did put into your packet the percentage of what each of their items are, and they do meet the percentages. Let me see, maybe it's easier to go back here. But let's be, like, the one thing that we need to remember, and that's where it kind of gets confusing, is just that the only reason the percentages come into play are the Meadows restrictive covenants. So, and those only look at the first floor. So this structure actually has more than one floor on those columns. So they are meeting those standards based on the first floor calculations. I'll pull those back up.
Is there somebody here to speak for the applicant?
Jeremy Fields, Appalachia Design, 245 Birch Street, Bluntville, Tennessee. Here on behalf of Turnhart Acquisitions. As Ms. Rice said, the brick is only per the first floor, so the metal above the windows would not be included in that calculation.
Okay. Do you want to make a statement about the overall design? Or?
Yeah, well, just backing up to the original design, we did not design the building. As previously stated, it was a pre-designed, pre-manufactured building. The building requires a thinner facade, and that's why the brick panel was submitted. It was from the architect that designed it. Because of the design and the construction of it, it could not handle a full width brick. Now, anywhere we're going down to the ground and up, we can make it work, a full width brick. The problem above the windows is there's no way to support the brick above the window. We can't do lintels the way the building's designed. There's no way to do steel to carry the brick. So that's the reasoning for the metal above the windows. If we had the brick panel, the composite brick panel, it would work because of the thickness of it. So that would be the reasoning for the metal panels above the windows. The metal on the top, the change of color from the original design, this picture you're seeing here is Doug's Superwash trademark. So it's all red, silver at the top. That's exactly matches Kingsport, with the exception that Kingsport is all metal. It's red metal up to the portion of the silver, and then you've got the silver bands around the top. When the original design came out, it was they did the red because of trying to get as much red as possible with being a brick building. So that would be the request for change from the metals at the main top to go from red to silver. And then the painting of the brick is essentially it comes down to the fact that Powell's was painted, and then the owner thought, well, Powell's painted, why can't my brick be painted? And then, so that's why we requested that revision.
Questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, in light of the town attorney's comments, I don't believe we can act this evening. I would make a motion that we table this action pending further clarification from the pending lawsuit, and/or take the matter up at the next meeting, should the 60-day time period prove an obstacle.
All right. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Quetch seconded. Any additional discussion? Ms. Rice, if you would call the roll.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Pennington? Mr. Sproles?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson? And Mr. Schuman?
Aye. All right. I think that's what we need to do. All right, let's see. The next item on the agenda is old business matters not on the agenda. COA waiver, Letitia Peltzer, 418 East Main Street.
We just put the waivers in for you all to see what we're doing during the month, so there's no action that needs to
Okay.
be taken.
Any announcements? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and then we'll reconvene for the ordinance discussion after this is over.
I'll make that motion.
Okay? Ms. Quetch, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Sproles, second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.